we are continuing our exploration of AA's 12 steps and how they help us achieve emotional sobriety. And it's unfortunately a little known fact that Bill even wrote in the 12 and 12, and I think it's the second paragraph, that if we practice these principles in our daily affairs, that we and those about us begin to achieve emotional sobriety. So in fact, the intended purpose of the 12 steps, as Bill saw it, was to help us achieve emotional sobriety. Well, we've been talking about that, and we've taken a journey through the first 5 steps, and I just want to recap the energy that is created when we're working the steps, because there's kind of like a charge and discharge is a way that I like to think about what's happening in the steps. And the first step, we're really developing this charge. We're powerless over alcohol or whatever the issues we're struggling with our life. And even more relevant to emotional sobriety is that our lives have become unmanageable. And what's made our lives unmanageable is the fact that we have put the cart before the horse, that we demand life to be the way that we think it should be, and then try to force life to fit into our expectations. And whether it's life or people or whatever it is we have this idea that we're okay only if life goes according to our perfectionist specifications and rules. And Bill called that becomes an impossible way of life. Well, when we fully embrace that and we really get that, it throws us into an existential crisis. Oh my God, I'm destroying my life and I don't know how to stop this, right? My goodness, what am I going to do? And that's where we're set up now. We're just ready for a resolution of that existential crisis, is the way I like to think about it. And that's when step 2 comes along and says there's hope. You can be restored to sanity. You can have a life that is based on, a much healthier attitude and approach. It is possible. So the fact that hope is held out for us, it starts to resolve that crisis we're in. And now, instead of being motivated by pain because our life is unmanageable, we have this hope that starts to develop that there's a better way for us, that there's a new possibility. So the original motivation that is generated by pain becomes a motivation generated by possibilities, by growth, and that there is another way of life. And that's where step 3 comes along, right? So we have this hope, there is another possibility. Well, hope without a commitment, without daily intentions, is just fantasy. We're not going to go anywhere. We're not going to change anything in our life. So in step 3, we make a commitment. We make a commitment to living a new life that's based on a different set of attitudes and principles, ones that are nourishing, ones that are life affirming, ones that enhance my relationship with myself and with others. That's the commitment we make in step 3. Now, a commitment without any action followed by it isn't going to work, right? We've got to go ahead and get into specific action. And that's what happens in step 4. Now we're said, okay, you want this new way of life. You made a commitment to it. Now make this inventory. Take a look at yourself. All right? Get honest with yourself. Start seeing what you're doing that is interfering with, that's sabotaging the kind of life that is possible for you. Essentially, we're saying, let's look at our unreasonable expectations and our unenforceable rules that have caused so much damage in our life in terms of our relationship with ourselves or others. Those rules we're going to call toxic rules. Toxic rules are rules that diminish you and diminish your relationships with other people, as opposed to what we would call nourishing rules, which enhance you and enhance your relationship with others. Well, we don't know about those. I mean, we haven't lived our life according to those principles. And we really desperately want to learn. But before we can, I can't change something that I don't take responsibility for. Step 4 is about taking responsibility for who I am and taking responsibility for creating the existence that I'm experiencing. It is letting go of the idea that I'm a victim, and it's owning how I create my existence, how I produce my symptoms, how I construct my reality. That's what I'm doing in step 4. I'm getting in touch with this. I'm owning these things because there's that paradox of the theory of change. I can't change something until I completely own it. So now I take that and I'm developing at the same time I'm looking at all this, I'm developing this muscle of self-examination, of looking at myself and taking a look at what's going on with me, rather than what we typically do is looking at what everybody else is doing that's wrong. Well, God, Karen, if you could just be different, I could have such a great relationship with you. Or Brian, if you would do things according to my way, I mean, we would be fine. We'd get together wonderfully. So that's what we're changing. We're turning around some bad habits that we have, habits that are quite destructive in our life. So we're doing that. We're getting this information, but we can't just hold this information. It can't be a soliloquy. It can't be just something that we think about, because we need to learn the value of being in relationship with someone, the value of a healthy relationship, and we find an enlightened witness to share what we're learning about ourselves. And then we relate that to that person, and we start examining the exact nature of our wrongs. And what we find is that we have this unhealthy dependence. And that unhealthy dependence we have is driven so many of these behaviors that are so harmful and toxic in our lives. So that's where we've been left, right? At this point in time, we've worked those first 5 steps, and now we're ready to take another step. Now we've seen it, we've owned it. We say you got to name it to tame it. We've named it so we can start to tame these things. And so now we get into action to clean up some of what we've learned about ourselves and start to really let go, right? We're entirely ready. That's what this step says. We're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. Now, those of you that have been listening to me for a while, is that I believe that God is within us, right? I don't think of God out there as that God's somehow going to do something for me I'm not doing for myself. God moves me, or the force in God has created within me this desire to move me towards what I can be. And I've often given the analogy of a child that is crawling, desiring to walk. No one has to tell that child to walk. If you're a parent, I don't think you stood over your infant and said, you've been on your hands and knees long enough. You've been crawling around this house for at least a couple weeks. Get off your hands and knees, pull yourself up and learn how to walk. You don't have to do that. It is within your child, just like an acorn is going to become an oak tree. You can't tell that acorn to become an oak tree. It wants to grow to what it can be. We want to be what we can be. That force is strong inside of us. Now, we all know that some of the nonsense ideas in our heads and stuff like that, and the expectations we have ourselves, totally knocks that off, kilter, right? I say, thank God we don't have the consciousness at, 9 months old that we have when we're 32 years old. Because if we did, none of us would have learned how to walk. We would have got up, we would have taken a few steps, we would have fallen a few times, and we would have all thrown in the towel. Forget this stuff. I can't do it. Obviously, this is too hard. No, a child doesn't do that. How many times does a child get up and walk after they've fallen? As many as that child needs to learn how to walk. There isn't a rule in that child's head about how many times it has to fall. It will fall as many times as necessary until its body learns how to coordinate all kinds of muscles and nerve impulses and signals and all kinds of things to pull off walking, which is no small feat. It's quite an achievement. And then we keep growing from that point on. We also want to learn how to talk. Nobody has to tell us to start imitating people. We want to develop our language, just like that acorn wants to become an oak tree. That's within you. That's within me. That movement towards what we can be, that movement towards wholeness, that movement towards self-realization, self-actualization. Now, that's an amazing force, and that's why I see God in that all over the place. I mean, to me, that's incredible that that force exists in this world. It's an incredibly powerful force. And so now, here we are, we're saying, now I'm entirely ready, right, to have God remove all these defects of character. Well, how is it that we become ready? Well, I think when we get honest with ourselves in steps 4 and 5, we start to realize that I have not fulfilled my potential as a human being. In fact, I've grown in many ways that are very, very different than who I would like to be. Our sense of ourself becomes derailed in many, many ways. And we don't know how to live a better life, but yet most of us know that there might be a possibility out there that can be a better life. So in this step, we start to become aware of that. And there's a few things that I'll just read, but we're going to be digging in this step for a while because this is such an important step. Bill calls this step the step that separates the men from the boys. It's that important to us, that this is where we really start to grow ourselves and to grow ourselves to be towards emotional sobriety, if you will. That's what this happens. That's what happens with this. But I want to point out a few things that he says here. First of all, Bill sets the expectation that you will not become perfect by working this step. While you may be ready to let go of these things, there's a process involved. And he says, this does not mean that we expect all of our character defects to be lifted out of us, as the drive to drink was lifted for many of us. He says a few of them may be, but with most of them, we shall have to be content with patient improvement. Patient improvement. Now, dig this, because this to me is really the most important thing about this step. We'll get into other things that are also important, but this is incredibly important. He says the key words entirely ready underline the fact that we want to aim at the very best we know or can learn. This step is about developing the best possible attitude towards ourselves, towards life, and towards our relationships that we can possibly have. And if we continue to hold our humility, which is that we accept, that we own that we have made mistakes, that we own that we have limitations, that we own that there's gaps in our knowledge. If we can own that we're ignorant, then we start to make ourselves teachable. Aiming at the best possible attitude means aiming at emotional sobriety. And that's what we're learning in this step. And it means aiming at letting go of our expectations, the expectations we have about how things should be, and instead learning how to cope with what is. I was telling Thom when we were getting on the meeting earlier tonight, I'm saying, God, I really had, I was given a couple great challenges today to work this principle of emotional sobriety. My wife has, she has taken a position in Philadelphia. We're going to be moving to Philadelphia at the end of June. And so we're looking at house. We put some money down on a house, and we've been, thinking about, I've been designing the music room for this house. I had it all laid out and I had my guitars on the wall already and I was already seeing them there. And then we had the inspection this week. So first round of inspection, there was some red boxes that the inspector found. These things must be figured out. And look, this house was built in 2002. Once again, I tried to have reasonable expectations. There's going to be things that after 20 years or so, a house is going to need to be addressed in a home. But today they did the stucco inspection. And that's where they drill holes into the stucco to see how much moisture is underneath the stucco. And back in this period of time in Philadelphia, the new home builders were not using the proper technique with stucco construction. I think there has to be a flashing underneath the stucco or something like that, so the water drains and doesn't go into the wood and now create moisture and then mold and rotten wood and stuff. And guess what? A lot of moisture in the house today. So my heart just sank. Oh no. That's not going to be my music room anymore. I'm going to have to take the guitars off the wall. Thank God I didn't put them on the wall yet. But in my mind, I put them on the wall. I was moved into this house. I mean, talk about getting ahead of myself. When I get upset, there's something wrong with me. I was telling Thom, my God, I had not only made the plans, but I had executed them already in terms of this whole thing. And I had to pull back and say, okay, this is not going to be the house. Let go of that one. And now let's get on with the next thing about finding what's next. So anyway, that's what this step is about. What we're going to be doing next week is looking at this getting entirely ready. And to get entirely ready, we have to understand how these things that Bill called character defects were functional in our life, what they did in our life, because to let go of them, we also need to understand what they were doing for us. We will do that next week. I will now turn this over to Thom. Thom is in the house. He will unmute himself. Thank you.
There's always a better house, buddy. Every time.
I know.
Every time, man. Every time that house, when we've shopped for houses in our lives, it's like you lose it. And, there's no better literal experience of that, but also therefore no better metaphor for investing ourselves too quickly than shopping for houses. It's like because you fall in love, you get the place that you do, and then there'll be a place that when I congratulations to Jess, by the way, for her wonderful job, and I'll be sending some warning letters to some friends of mine up in Philadelphia.
Please.
That you're coming, but it's.
I mean, do you imagine how good this guitar would have looked on the walls, huh? I mean,
it will. We just don't know what wall yet. That's all. We know what we now. Think about how much information we have. We have which guitar and which guitars. We just don't have which walls yet. So that's coming. And when we come up to see you and we see the house that you're in, and back, in the days where we can move beyond COVID and all this other stuff, we'll look around your house and you'll go like, thank God we didn't get the stucco thing, because I love this place. It's going to be great. And boy, I certainly identify. Well, I just have a few brief things to say about step 6, especially because what you just said, because some of the notes I had that I've been thinking about today and what I just jotted down here really have to do with how do we become ready, and what you're saying, we're talking about that more next time. I'll follow your guidance there. The first thing I wrote is just a quote from this 12 and 12 that kind of encapsulates a lot of the meaning for me of step 6, which is the only urgent thing is that we make a beginning and keep trying. The only urgent thing. It's like, I love the idea that there is an urgent thing, but there's only one, this urgent thing. And it's that we make a beginning and keep trying. And to me, and I'm kind of redoing my relationship to the steps as I'm listening to you go through them. I've had a sense of the connectedness of them before this, Alan, but it's like you really have done a beautiful job and continue to do a beautiful job of stringing these together in a way that it just gives them deeper meaning for me. And so hang on just a second. Did you find those? Okay. I'm sorry. My wife loves Tootsie Roll Pops, but she says don't let me know where they are. But every time I hide them places, she finds them. It's like she just came in I'm looking over there going like, I thought that was a really good hiding place. And she had two and she took off. So anyway, but I'm sure many other people listening to this will agree that the way you put this together and have these build on each other is really helpful. But I'll go back to my sentence. The only urgent thing is that we make a beginning and keep trying. To me, step 6, this is the meaning of step 6 to me, is this is the one we've talked about, like laying the foundation. If there's a black thing going across the screen, it's my cat. We've talked about the early steps, laying a foundation. We've talked about the going inside with step 4 and with 5, and with step 6. I think we enter into, step 6 is although we work the steps always, or have their tools, and you go back and use them again and again. Step 6 is something that we do, if we're really in our recovery, we do constantly. That's a part of our day-to-day, our daily practice, is to make beginnings and keep trying. It's like, it's all, it's all about humility, I love actually how much I was rereading the 12 and 12. I love how often the word perfection shows up in the chapter, which when I first glanced through it, I hadn't looked at it in a long time. I looked through it. I thought, oh, well, this is going to be very contradictory to what we're doing, but it's not. It's talking about, I love that idea that it gives you this idea because it's, if I say what my daily practice is, it is to be the best version of myself that I can be. And it is, I love this. One of the things about this step is it allows me, gives me permission just to be the human that I am, which is to say, I'm not going to be releasing these all at once. There may be some that are going to be much slower, more delayed than others. And and I really believe this is a step I'll be working for the rest of my life. And there'll be plenty left over on the day that I drop off the planet, but it's a process step. It goes on and on and on. And it's about me being the best version of myself that I can be. And that's the difference. That's not perfection. And what they call it in what Bill calls it here is aiming toward perfection. I love the idea that I can aim toward perfection. And that doesn't mean I have to have any delusion that I'm ever going to reach it. It's like I'm just going, and I love measuring progress by direction, not distance traveled. I tell my clients that all the time. It's if I'm heading to Philadelphia sometime later, from Nashville, Tennessee. The truth is, if I have moved northeast on a particular day, maybe it's 12 feet, or maybe it's 6 miles, but that's the direction I'm going. I'm making progress. And that's what this step's about, making progress. So thank you.
Great, Thom. Thank you very much.